At 14:27 on June 14, 1944, Sergeant Gordon Harris crouched inside his Sherman Firefly on the eastern edge of Lehr in Normandy, watching 5 German Panther tanks advance across the open fields 800 meters away. He was 31 years old, only 8 days into the campaign, and had yet to knock out a single tank. The British 7th Armored Division had already lost 42 Shermans in 6 days. Panthers and Tigers dominated every encounter. The standard Sherman's 75mm gun was practically useless against a Panther's frontal armor beyond 300 meters. The Germans knew this and attacked straight on. Harris commanded the only tank in his squadron capable of stopping a Panther at long range. The Sherman Firefly, a controversial, improvised modification the British High Command had tried to cancel 3 times before D-Day. In January 1943, the Ministry of Supply dismissed the idea of mounting a 17-pounder anti-tank gun into an American Sherman turret. The gun was too large, the turret too cramped, and Britain, they argued, had better tanks on the way, the Challenger and the Cromwell. No reason to waste resources on an unrequested hybrid. Major George Bridie at Lulworth Armored Fighting School ignored the decision. He forced a 17-pounder into a Sherman turret anyway, with no proper recoil system. The gun had to be locked rigid, leaving the entire tank to absorb the shock when fired. It barely worked. The ministry ordered him to shut the project down. Then, in June 1943, Lieutenant Colonel George Wythe joined the effort. Wounded at Gazala when his Grant tank was destroyed, he understood the cost of inferior firepower. Working with Bridie, he solved the recoil problem, altered the breech, added a new hatch for the gunner, relocated the radio into a box welded to the rear of the turret, and removed the hull machine gunner entirely to store the bulky 17-pounder rounds. When the ministry discovered the continued work, they tried to halt it again. Wythe Ridge went above their heads, appealing to Major General Raymond Briggs and Claude Gibb at the Ministry of Supply. He argued that the Challenger program was failing and the Cromwell's turret ring was too narrow to fit the 17-pounder. The Firefly, he insisted, was Britain's only realistic answer before the invasion. The ministry finally approved production in November 1943. But by May 31, 1944, just days before D-Day, only 342 Fireflies existed, roughly 1 per 4 tank troop. British armored units entered Normandy desperately short of weapons capable of defeating Panthers. The Germans adapted quickly. Within 3 days of D-Day, Panzer commanders identified the Firefly by its long gun barrel and issued orders across their units. Destroy Fireflies first, always. British crews tried to camouflage the barrels with mud, paint, and wire mesh to resemble standard Shermans, but the deception rarely worked. Harris had been a gunner until 4 days earlier. His tank commander had been killed on June 10th when a Panther round smashed through the turret near Tilly-sur-Seulles, a direct hit, instantaneous. Harris inherited command. His gunner, Trooper Alec McKillop, 24, Scottish, steady, and sharp-eyed, had fired only 7 shots in combat, 3 misses for hits, all against half-tracks, never against a tank. The 5 Panthers approaching Lehr spread into a line abreast formation, Panzer Lehr markings visible. They pushed toward British infantry dug in around the village. 3 standard Shermans hid behind buildings, their 75mm guns useless at this range. Harris's Firefly was the only tank that stood a chance. 800 meters, 700, 650. At their current speed, the Panthers would reach lethal range in about 90 seconds. Harris had positioned the Firefly behind a stone wall on the village outskirts, hull down, only the turret exposed. The 17-pounder's barrel stuck out several feet farther than a normal Sherman's, difficult to conceal. McKillop sat on Harris's left, the loader crouched behind, the driver in the hull. The Firefly crew numbered 4. The hull gunner position had been eliminated to make room for the massive 38-pound shells, nearly twice the weight of a standard Sherman round. The Panther was Germany's answer to the Soviet T-34, 45 tons, sloped armor, and a deadly 75mm KWK, 42-gun capable of penetrating 4 inches of armor at 1,000 meters. Its frontal hull armor measured 80 millimeters sloped at 55 degrees, an effective thickness of about 140 millimeters, with 50 millimeters on the sides and 40 millimeters at the rear. On roads, it could reach 28 miles per hour. Its vulnerabilities were its sides, its rear, and its unreliable mechanics. German tank crews often called the Panther the best medium tank in the world. By comparison, the Sherman Firefly weighed 33 tons, had a maximum of 3 inches of armor, and topped out at 25 miles per hour. Inferior to the Panther in nearly every category but one, its gun. The British 17-pounder boasted a muzzle velocity close to 3,000 feet per second. With standard, armor-piercing capped rounds, it could penetrate 163 millimeters of armor at 500 meters and 150 millimeters at 1,000, more than enough to punch through a Panther's front. Britain had also developed APDS rounds capable of penetrating 256 millimeters, but they were unreliable beyond 500 meters and tended to foul the barrel. Harris carried 12 of these experimental rounds and 65 standard AP shells. If the Firefly's gunner could aim, the tank could kill Panthers. McKillop tracked the lead Panther through his telescopic sight. Range, 600 meters. The German commander was still standing in the cupola, scanning for threats. McKillop adjusted for wind, distance, and the target's steady movement. The 17-pounder's recoil was violent. When it fired, both gunner and commander had to blink or risk being blinded by the flash. It was so bright that hedgerows often caught fire from the blast alone. Undergrowth burned, and once the Firefly fired, its position was instantly exposed. 550 meters. The Panthers remained in formation, advancing at a measured pace. McKillop's breathing slowed. His finger hovered near the trigger. Harris, who had trained gunners before the war, recognized the signs. McKillop was calm, focused, the type of gunner who made difficult shots look easy. They needed 5 perfect shots, 5 Panthers, 1 Firefly, 1 chance before the Germans pinpointed their location, before return fire found them, before the Panthers closed to lethal range. The margin for error was 0. 500 meters. Harris checked his watch. 14:29. 2 minutes since the Panthers appeared. The lead German commander dropped into his turret and sealed the hatches. Combat ready. They knew British armor was nearby. They were hunting. McKillop centered his sight on the lead Panther's frontal glacis, right where the hull armor met the turret ring, the weakest point on the front of the tank. At this distance, the round would reach the target in under a second. No time for the German crew to react. At 14:30, McKillop fired. The Firefly bucked backward 6 inches. A brilliant orange flash filled the turret. Harris was blinded for nearly 2 seconds. A hedge 10 feet in front of the tank burst into flames. Smoke rolled upward as the vegetation burned. Through the haze, Harris saw the lead Panther roll forward 3 meters and stop. Smoke leaked from the hatches. No fire. No explosion. The crew was dead. 1 Panther down. The remaining 4 reacted instantly. They scattered without hesitation, professionals. 1 veered left, 2 angled right, and the 5th reversed rapidly. The burning hedgerow gave away the Firefly's exact position. Harris knew they had perhaps 15 seconds before accurate return fire. McKillop swung the gun right, tracking the 3rd Panther as it maneuvered. The German tank was moving at about 12 miles per hour, turning to angle its armor. McKillop led the target, compensated for movement, and fired. The 17-pounder roared again. Flash! Recoil! The round smashed through the Panther's side, armor near the suspension. The tank's ammunition detonated. Its turret lifted 8 feet into the air, flipped, and crashed down upside down. Flames engulfed the hull. 2 Panthers destroyed in 40 seconds. The remaining 3 opened fire. 375 millimeters rounds screamed toward the stone wall. 1 hit 20 feet to the left. 1 struck the wall directly, spraying the Firefly with stone fragments. The 3rd passed overhead, so closely Harris could hear it whistle. They were ranging in. Harris ordered the driver to reverse. The Firefly backed 20 feet, sliding behind a barn. The move took seconds. McKillop reloaded. The loader heaved another 38-pound shell into the breech and locked it. McKillop scanned again. The second Panther, now on the left flank, was swinging toward the village from the northwest, attempting to outmaneuver them. The 4th and 5th Panthers advanced from the east, splitting their approach to divide British defensive fire. Standard German armor doctrine. McKillop chose the flanking Panther. Range, 450 meters. The tank was charging head-on, showing its frontal armor, a far more difficult shot. McKillop tracked the movement, led by 3 tank lengths, and fired. The round struck low on the lower glacis and tore through into the transmission. The Panther lurched to a halt, immobilized. Its crew bailed out immediately. 3 Panthers down, 2 still mobile. The remaining pair fired again. Both rounds slammed into the barn. Wood shattered. Part of the structure collapsed, filling the air with dust and debris. The Firefly was exposed. The barn no longer offered protection. The Germans had zeroed in. The 4th Panther closed to 400 meters, gun already swinging toward the Firefly. McKillop had perhaps 3 seconds before the German fired at near point-blank range. He fired first. The 17-pounder round crossed the distance in less than a second and smashed into the Panther's gun mantlet, the thickest armor on the tank, 120 millimeters of cast steel. It didn't matter. The round tore through the mantlet, through the gun breech, and into the turret. The Panther's ammunition cooked off instantly. The turret blew off, flipped end over end, and landed 30 feet away. For Panthers destroyed or disabled. The 5th and final Panther halted its advance. Its commander understood exactly what was happening. For tanks lost in under 2 minutes, the Firefly was lethal. Continuing the attack was suicide. The Panther began reversing toward the Treline, trying to break contact. Range, 520 meters and increasing. Harris made a decision, let it go. The village was safe. British infantry could hold. But he also knew what happened when German tanks escaped. They warned the rest of their units. By nightfall, every panzer commander within 10 miles would know a Firefly was operating near Lehr. They would return with more tanks, better tactics, infantry support. McKillop kept the retreating Panther in his sight. Range, 540 meters, 560. The Panther picked up speed, reversing at about 10 miles per hour. The German commander stood in the cupola again, watching the Firefly, waiting to see if they would pursue. German doctrine prioritized preservation of armor. Losing 4 tanks was catastrophic. Losing all 5 was unacceptable. Harris weighed the options. Pursue and risk an ambush. The Treline could hide more Panthers, anti-tank guns, or Panzerfaust teams, or let it escape and deal with a coordinated counterattack later. Neither choice was good. Ammunition check. 6 17-pounder rounds left, plus 12 APDS. The Firefly's engine was hot from constant maneuvering. Fuel at 3/4, plenty for continued fighting. The 5th Panther reached the Treline at 600 meters. It paused. The turret traversed left, then right. The commander was searching for threats, evaluating angles. Then the tank turned, exposing its side armor, and began moving parallel to the Treline. Not retreating, repositioning. Harris realized instantly that the German wasn't running. He was preparing for a long-range duel. The Panther's 75mm gun was accurate out to 1,000 meters. At 600, he had a clean shot. And now the German commander knew exactly where the Firefly sat. The collapsed barn, the burning hedgerow, the shattered stone wall. Every landmark around the Firefly was now marked by gunfire. Every firing position was compromised. The Panther halted behind a low rise, hull down, with only its turret exposed. Its gun elevated slightly as it took aim. The German crew was skilled, disciplined, patient. They would wait for the Firefly to shift, even slightly, reveal a vulnerable angle, and then fire. At this distance, one accurate hit would destroy Harris's tank. The Firefly's armor couldn't stop a Panther round at 600 meters. McKillop centered his sight on the Panther's turret, just 20 degrees of arcade visible above the ridge. A tiny target, moving, and the German commander clearly knew how to fight Fireflies. Harris ordered the driver forward. The Firefly edged 15 feet to the right, taking a new angle. The Panther's turret tracked the movement instantly. Both tanks aimed at each other, 600 meters apart. Both commanders understood the next shot would decide everything. The German fired first. The round screamed past the Firefly's left side, missing by barely 3 feet. The shock wave rattled Harris inside the turret. The German gunner had guessed the Firefly would continue moving right, and guessed wrong. McKillop didn't hesitate. He fired while the Panther's gun was still recoiling. The 17-pounder round flew straight and smashed into the turret's right face, penetrating cleanly. The Panther's turret froze mid-traverse. Smoke poured from the commander's cupola. The 5th Panther was done. Time, 14:33. 6 minutes since the first contact. 5 German Panthers destroyed. 0 British losses. The 3 standard Shermans emerged from behind the village buildings. Their commanders had watched the entire fight, incapable of intervening. Their 75mm guns lacked both range and penetrating power. The Firefly had fought the battle alone. Harris scanned the tree line. Something was wrong. Panthers rarely operated in groups of 5. They typically deployed in platoons of 4 or in full companies of 12 to 15. Where were the rest? He keyed the radio and reported. 5 Panthers destroyed near Lehr. Request reconnaissance of the eastern approaches. Possible additional armor in the area. Squadron HQ responded with congratulations and told him to hold position. Infantry would move forward to secure the disabled tanks and capture any survivors. Intelligence wanted to inspect the wrecks. Harris acknowledged. Inside the turret, the crew exhaled as the adrenaline faded. McKillop's hands trembled slightly. The loader slumped against the turret wall, exhausted from manhandling 5 38-pound shells in 2 minutes. The driver reported the engine temperature was high, but still within limits. Harris climbed out of the turret to survey the field. For Panthers burned fiercely. A 5th sat immobilized, its crew long gone. The Firefly had fired 5 shots at ranges between 400 and 600 meters, 5 hits against the best medium tanks Germany produced by a crew that had never before destroyed an enemy tank. British infantry advanced across the fields, securing the area around the wrecks. Harris knew what would follow. Reports, intelligence officers' measurements, interviews. Every detail of the engagement would be analyzed. How one Firefly had destroyed 5 Panthers in 6 minutes. But Harris also knew the Germans would study it just as closely. They would realize the Firefly was more dangerous than expected. They would adapt new tactics, new formations, deliberate hunts for Fireflies. Today's victory would make tomorrow more deadly. The war moved on. Lehr was just one village, one battle. Thousands more lay ahead, across France and into Germany. By 1600 hours, British intelligence teams arrived at Lehr. They examined all 5 Panthers, measured penetration paths, documented internal damage, and interviewed Harris and McKillop. The report reached 21st Army Group headquarters that evening and was distributed to armored regiments by morning. Their findings were significant. All 5 Panthers belonged to Panzer Lehr Division, Germany's elite armored training and demonstration unit, crews with extensive combat experience, many veterans of the Eastern Front. The fact that a single Firefly had destroyed 5 Panthers from such a formation validated everything Withridge and Bridie had argued a year and a half earlier. The Firefly worked. It could defeat Germany's best, but the engagement also exposed its vulnerabilities. The brilliant muzzle flash set nearby vegetation ablaze, revealing firing positions instantly. The long barrel made maneuvering difficult in villages and bocage country. The lack of a hull gunner reduced crew flexibility, and loading the heavy 17-pounder shells quickly wore down loaders, reducing sustained rate of fire. The Firefly was a specialist weapon, Devastating when used correctly, vulnerable when isolated. Harris's after-action report included a detail that soon became legend among British tankers. Throughout the battle, he never shouted commands. Instead, he spoke quietly to McKillop, calm, steady corrections, make it count. The 17-pounder ammunition was expensive. Each round cost significantly more than standard Sherman shells. Harris treated every shot as precious. McKillop answered with perfect accuracy. 5 rounds. 5 kills. No misses. Lehr was not the Firefly's only success. On June 14th near Villers-Bocage, another Firefly knocked out 3 Panthers in a single afternoon. At Tilly-sur-Seulles, a Canadian Firefly destroyed 2 Tigers. A pattern emerged. When properly used, the Firefly could dominate German armor. But Firefly crews were learning hard lessons. The tank's distinctive long barrel made it a priority target. German tank commanders began engaging Fireflies first for maximum range. They coordinated suppressive fire to isolate the Fireflies while maneuvering other tanks. They used infantry to spot and mark Firefly positions. By mid-June 1944, Firefly survival rates were worrying. They were powerful but vulnerable. British commanders urgently requested more Fireflies. The Ministry of Supply accelerated Firefly production. By late June, nearly 400 had been delivered, still far short of demand. Every regiment wanted more. Each new engagement proved their worth. The hybrid tank that officials had tried to cancel 3 times was now Britain's most valuable armored asset in Normandy. Harris and McKillop kept fighting. Their Firefly survived Lignières, but the Normandy campaign was only beginning. Operation Epsom loomed, followed by Goodwood. Between June 14th and August 25th, 1944, their Firefly destroyed 9 additional German armored vehicles, 3 Panthers for Panzer IVs and 2 Stooges. 14 confirmed tank kills in just 72 days. They fought at Villers-Bocage, Caen, and Falaise. Their tank absorbed 11 enemy hits, 8 from machine guns, 2 from Panzerfausts, and 1 glancing 75mm strike on the turret. But each time the crew escaped unharmed, repaired the Firefly, and returned to the line. McKillop remained incredibly precise. After Lignières, he fired 47 more 17-pounder rounds in combat. 31 struck their targets, a remarkable 66% accuracy under battlefield conditions at ranges from 200 to 700 meters. The 7th Armored Division took notice. Harris received the Military Cross in July, while McKillop earned the Military Medal. Both citations mention their actions at Lignières. 5 Panthers destroyed, flawless gunnery, steady leadership under fire. But most Firefly crews were less fortunate. By August 1st, British forces had lost 118 Fireflies, 43% of all those deployed. German tank commanders quickly adapted, prioritizing Fireflies as primary targets. They used terrain to close distance, coordinated multiple tanks to overwhelm lone Fireflies, and increasingly relied on Panzerfaust teams to exploit the Fireflies' slower handling at close range. Even so, their effectiveness was undeniable. Intelligence reports from June to August showed Fireflies were responsible for 64% of all German heavy tank kills achieved by British units, knocking out Panthers and Tigers nearly 3 times more often than standard Shermans. With the growing availability of APDS ammunition by late July, Fireflies could even punch through Tiger II frontal armor at realistic combat ranges. By late August, armored regiments began receiving 2 Fireflies per 4 tank troop instead of 1. Production ramped up. British conversion plants were turning 60 Shermans per week into Fireflies. The Ministry of Supply, once determined to cancel the project, now treated it as top priority. Churchill personally followed production reports. Harris and McKillop fought on through France, Belgium, and into the Netherlands. Their Firefly was finally knocked out near Nijmegen during Operation Market Garden, destroyed by a direct hit from an 88mm anti-tank gun. The vehicle burned, but the crew escaped unharmed. Within 3 days, they were assigned a new Firefly and continued fighting until Germany's surrender in May 1945. After the war, Harris returned to Yorkshire and worked as a garage mechanic. McKillop went home to Scotland and became a schoolteacher. Both survived the war, and both lived quietly. The battle at Lignières became a brief entry in regimental histories. Yet the Sherman Firefly's impact was profound. Between D-Day and VE Day, roughly 2,100 were produced and fielded by British, Canadian, Polish, and Free French units across Northwest Europe and Italy. Fireflies destroyed an estimated 900 German tanks and assault guns, including Panthers, Tigers, and Panzer IVs. No other Allied tank matched their record against German heavy armor. More German heavy tanks fell to Fireflies than to any other Allied armored vehicle in the European theater. The Lignières engagement became a case study. British tank schools analyzed Harris's decisions, McKillop's accuracy, their use of terrain, and their fire discipline. 5 Panthers destroyed in 6 minutes. Perfect gunnery. Calm command under pressure. The battle proved what the Firefly could achieve with a skilled crew and validated every argument supporting its development. The deeper lesson was one of wartime innovation. The Firefly almost never existed. It had been rejected repeatedly by military bureaucracy. It became reality only because 2 officers defied convention, and because no other solution could meet the threat. The impossible design no one wanted became the weapon Britain needed most. The 17-pounder continued in service long after the war, arming early Cold War British tanks and influencing anti-tank gun development for 2 decades. The Firefly itself was retired by 1946, replaced by the Comet, and later the Centurion. Most Fireflies were scrapped. Only a few survive today in museums at Bovington, the Imperial War Museum, and the Musée de Blindes in France. Harris died in 1987 at 74. McKillop passed away in 1993 at 73. Neither wrote memoirs or sought attention. They were tankers. They did their job, survived, and went home. Lignières was just 1 day of a long war, 6 minutes of combat, 5 Panthers destroyed, a single line in the history books. But for the infantry they saved, and for every tanker who learned from that battle, it mattered. If this story moved you, consider supporting it. Hit the like button. Every like helps this story reach more people. Subscribe and turn on notifications. We're bringing forgotten histories back to life every day. Stories of tank crews who faced impossible odds with rejected weapons and flawless aim. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. The US? Canada? Australia? Somewhere else? Our community spans the globe. You're not just a viewer. You're helping keep these memories alive. Tell us your location, share if someone in your family served, or just say hello. Thank you for watching, and thank you for helping ensure that Harris and McKillop are never forgotten. They deserve to be remembered, and you're part of making that happen.